My son's fingers dug into my wrist so hard I gasped, and when I turned to look at his face, the color had drained from it completely, his lips pale, his eyes wide with something I had never seen in him before, pure, unfiltered terror. "Mom," he whispered again, his voice cracking, "we have to leave. Right now. Please." Behind us, my sister stood at the altar in her ivory gown, sunlight pouring through the trees, and everyone was smiling, and I had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything I thought I understood about my life was about to break apart in the middle of that beautiful garden. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something, because I believe this story matters, and I believe it will matter to you too. If you believe in kindness, in forgiveness, in second chances, in the idea that even the most broken among us can find their way back to the people they love, then please take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to our channel. Our community grows because of people like you, people who still believe that love and forgiveness are stronger than the wounds life leaves behind. Now, let me take you back to that morning, because to understand why my son grabbed my hand with such fear in his eyes, you need to understand everything that came before it. My name is Claire Whitfield, and I was 36 years old on the day my younger sister Rosalind got married in the backyard of our childhood home, under the same oak tree where we used to build forts as children, where our mother used to hang string lights every 4th of July, where my whole life had once felt simple and safe. Rosalind, Roz, as we all called her, was marrying a kind, steady man named Gareth Sutton, an architect with a gentle laugh and patient eyes, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order after meeting you once. Roz had waited a long time for a love like that, and watching her walk down the aisle that morning, her face glowing under the dappled sunlight, I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. I was happy for her. I was, in that moment, unguarded in a way I hadn't been in a very long time. Beside me sat my son, Tobias, though everyone called him Toby, a thoughtful, quiet 10-year-old with his father's eyes and my stubbornness. Toby had always been an old soul, the kind of child who noticed things adults missed, who asked questions that made you stop and think before answering. He had been excited about the wedding for weeks, mostly because he adored his Aunt Roz, who had spent countless afternoons teaching him constellations and building elaborate blanket forts in her old bedroom whenever she visited. That morning, he had worn his little navy suit with pride, his hair combed neatly, practicing his best behavior because Aunt Roz had asked him to be the ring bearer, a job he took more seriously than any 10-year-old I had ever known. To understand the fear I saw in his eyes that day, I have to go back further, to the year Toby turned 4, the year his father disappeared from our lives. My marriage to Nathaniel Cross had been, in its early years, filled with a kind of reckless, hopeful love, the kind you only have when you're young enough to believe love alone can fix anything. Nathaniel was charming and restless, a musician with big dreams and a bigger struggle with alcohol that I didn't fully understand until it was already unraveling everything we had built. There were nights I won't describe here, nights of broken promises and empty bottles, nights where I sat awake wondering if the man I married still existed somewhere beneath the person he had become. When Toby was 4, Nathaniel left in the middle of the night, taking almost nothing with him, leaving behind a note that said he needed to find himself, as if fatherhood were something you could simply set down like a bag that had grown too heavy. For 6 years, we heard almost nothing from him. A birthday card here, a hollow phone call there, each one leaving Toby more confused and quietly wounded than the last. I did my best to shield my son from the worst of it, to build him a life full of stability and love even without his father in it, but children are perceptive in ways we often underestimate, and Toby carried an ache he rarely spoke of, an ache I recognized because I carried a version of it too. I had told myself, over the years, that I had made peace with it, that I had moved past the anger and hurt into something calmer, something like acceptance. I believed that, right up until the moment my son's hand closed around my wrist in the middle of my sister's wedding, trembling like a leaf in a storm. The ceremony had just concluded, and the guests were rising from their white folding chairs, laughter and applause filling the warm afternoon air, when Toby tugged at my sleeve with such urgency that I nearly dropped my clutch. I knelt down to his level, brushing his hair back from his forehead, ready to ask what was wrong, assuming perhaps he needed the restroom or felt overwhelmed by the crowd, something ordinary and easily solved. But his face told a different story entirely. His eyes were fixed on something, someone, near the back of the garden, close to the gate that led out to the driveway, and his small body was shaking so hard I could feel it through his hand. "Mom," he said again, barely audible, "please, we have to go. He's here." I followed his gaze, my heart already pounding before I even understood why, and there, standing near the rose trellis at the edge of the yard, was a man I hadn't seen in 6 years, a man whose face had haunted the edges of my memory more times than I would ever admit out loud. Nathaniel Cross stood there in an ill-fitting gray suit, thinner than I remembered, his once thick hair now sparse and gray at the temples, his face weathered in a way that spoke of years I knew nothing about. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Toby, with an expression I couldn't quite name, something between longing and grief, something raw and unguarded, the look of a man who had spent years imagining this exact moment and still wasn't prepared for how it would feel. I felt the ground tilt slightly beneath me. Of all the things I had imagined might happen at my sister's wedding, a champagne spill, an awkward toast, a distant cousin causing a scene, I had never once imagined Nathaniel appearing out of nowhere, uninvited as far as I knew, standing at the edge of my sister's most sacred day like a ghost stepping out of the past. My first instinct, sharp and immediate, was to protect my son, to shield him from whatever confusion or pain this man's presence might bring. I understood, in that instant, exactly why Toby had grabbed my hand. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for me. He had spent years watching me rebuild myself from the wreckage Nathaniel left behind, and some deep, protective instinct in his small body had recognized danger before his mind had fully processed what he was seeing. "Toby," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady even as my pulse hammered in my ears, "it's okay. I need you to breathe for me, sweetheart. Can you do that?" He nodded, though his eyes never left the man by the trellis, and I realized my hands were shaking too, though I couldn't tell if it was fear, anger, or some other emotion I hadn't yet found the name for. Around us, the wedding guests continued their celebration, oblivious to the storm quietly gathering at the edge of the garden, and for a moment I considered simply taking Toby's hand and walking away, disappearing into the house, avoiding the confrontation entirely. It would have been easy. It would have been, in some ways, exactly what I had done for 6 years, avoid, protect, move forward without looking back. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was the sight of my sister across the yard, radiant and unaware, deserving of a day untouched by old wounds. Perhaps it was the look on Nathaniel's face, which was not the look of a man there to cause trouble, but the look of a man who seemed almost afraid himself, as though he expected to be turned away before he could say whatever he had come to say. Or perhaps it was simply that some part of me, buried under years of careful composure, needed to know why he was there, needed an answer to the question that had quietly lived in the back of my mind since the night he left: why? I asked my sister's new mother-in-law, a warm woman named Beatrice who happened to be standing nearby, to watch Toby for just a few minutes, promising him I would be right back, that nothing bad was going to happen, that he could see me the entire time from where he stood. Toby's grip on my hand tightened before he finally let go, his eyes glassy with unshed tears, and he whispered, "Don't let him hurt you again, Mom," a sentence so heavy for a 10-year-old to carry that it nearly broke me right there in front of everyone. I promised him I wouldn't, though I had no idea yet whether that promise was one I could actually keep. Walking toward Nathaniel felt like walking through water, every step slow and resistant, my mind flooding with memories I had spent years trying to file away, the sound of his key in the door at 3 in the morning, the smell of whiskey on his breath during Toby's second birthday party, the silence of the apartment after he finally left, the way Toby used to ask, in his small 4-year-old voice, when Daddy was coming home, until eventually he simply stopped asking at all. By the time I reached him, my heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. "Claire," he said, and his voice was different than I remembered, quieter, rougher, stripped of the easy charm that used to make him so convincing. "I know I shouldn't be here. I know I have no right." He glanced past me toward Toby, who stood watching us from a distance, Beatrice's hand resting protectively on his shoulder. I saw the wedding announcement in the town paper a few weeks ago. Rosa's engagement. I remembered how close you two always were, how she used to babysit Toby when he was small. I wasn't invited. I want you to know that. I came because I needed to see him. Just once. I needed to see my son. Anger rose in me like a tide, fast and consuming, 6 years of unspoken resentment finding a target at last. You don't get to do this, I said, my voice low and trembling with a fury I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, not this openly, not this close to the surface. You don't get to disappear for 6 years and then show up at my sister's wedding like this is some kind of movie moment. Do you have any idea what you did to him? Do you have any idea what it took to help him understand why his father just vanished? Nathaniel's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that startled me, not defensiveness, not the practiced excuses I remembered from our marriage, but genuine, raw grief. I know, he said. I know I don't deserve to say anything to either of you. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, Claire, not today, not like this. I'm here because 6 months ago, I found out I have a tumor in my liver, stage 4, and the doctors have given me maybe a year, maybe less. And when you're staring down something like that, all the noise falls away, and all you're left with is the truth of what you actually did with your life. And the truth is, the biggest regret I carry isn't the drinking, or the mistakes, or even losing you. It's that I have a son out there who doesn't know if his father ever loved him, and I couldn't die without at least trying to change that, even if it's already too late. The garden seemed to tilt around me, the laughter and music fading into a dull hum as his words settled into the space between us. I had imagined 100 different scenarios over the years for how I might feel if Nathaniel ever came back, anger, satisfaction, indifference, but I had never imagined this particular ache, the strange, complicated grief of learning that the man who broke our family was dying, that whatever chance existed for Toby to someday understand his father, to someday ask him the questions that still lived unanswered in his small heart, was rapidly running out. Why now? I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Why couldn't you have tried this sooner? Why did it take a diagnosis for you to remember you had a son? Because I was a coward, he said simply, without excuse, without the deflections I remembered so well. Because facing him meant facing everything I destroyed, and I didn't have the courage to do that while I still had time to waste. It's easy to tell yourself there's always tomorrow, until suddenly there isn't. He looked past me again toward Toby, his eyes glistening. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Claire. I'm not even asking to be part of his life in some big way. I just needed him to know I exist, that I think about him, that I'm sorry, before I run out of chances to say it. I stood there for a long moment, caught between the anger that had protected me for 6 years and the unexpected, unwelcome compassion stirring beneath it, a compassion I hadn't asked for and didn't fully want. Across the yard, I could see Toby watching us, his small face tight with worry, and I understood that whatever I decided in the next few minutes would shape not just this day, but the way my son understood forgiveness, anger, and the complicated nature of love for the rest of his life. Wait here, I said finally. Don't come any closer until I say it's okay. Nathaniel nodded, wiping his eyes quickly with the back of his hand, and I walked back across the lawn toward my son, my mind racing to find the right words, words I wasn't entirely sure existed. Toby ran the last few steps toward me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Are you okay? What did he want? Did he hurt you? The questions tumbled out of him rapid and desperate, and I knelt down again, taking his face gently in my hands. He didn't hurt me, I said softly. I promise you that. But Toby, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be very brave, okay? Your dad is sick. Very sick. The doctors say he doesn't have very much time left. I watched the information land in his eyes, watched confusion and grief and something like anger flicker across his young face all at once. He came here today because he wanted to see you. He wanted you to know that he thinks about you, and that he's sorry for everything, especially for leaving. He's not asking you to forgive him. He just wanted you to know. Toby was quiet for a long moment, his small hands twisting the fabric of his suit jacket, his eyes fixed on the ground. Is he going to die? He asked finally, his voice small in a way that broke something deep inside my chest. I don't know for certain, I said honestly, because I refused to lie to him, not about something this important. But it's possible, yes. The doctors think it's likely. He was quiet again, and I let him sit with it, resisting the urge to fill the silence with reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes red but his voice steadier than I expected. Do you forgive him? He asked. The question hit me harder than I anticipated, because I realized I didn't have a clear answer, not yet, not in that moment. I don't know, I admitted. I'm still figuring that out. But I think, Toby, that forgiveness isn't really about deciding someone deserves it. Sometimes it's about deciding you don't want to carry the anger anymore, because it's heavier than the thing you're angry about. I paused, searching his face. You don't have to decide anything right now. But if you want to see him, just for a few minutes, I'll be right there with you the whole time. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. Nobody is going to be upset with you either way. Toby looked past me toward Nathaniel, who stood at a respectful distance, his hands clasped in front of him, looking smaller and more uncertain than I had ever seen him look in the years I knew him as my husband. After a long moment, Toby nodded slowly. I want to see him, he said. Just for a little bit. But you have to stay with me the whole time. I promise, I said, and I meant it with every part of myself. We walked together across the lawn, my hand resting on Toby's shoulder, and I watched Nathaniel's face as we approached, watched the way his composure nearly broke entirely at the sight of his son walking toward him, taller than he remembered, older, a stranger and yet unmistakably his own child. He knelt down slowly, wincing slightly with what I now understood was the quiet pain of his illness, bringing himself to Toby's eye level. Hi, buddy, he said, his voice thick. You probably don't remember me very well. I'm your dad. Toby studied him for a long moment, the way children do when they are searching for something true beneath the surface of an adult's face. I remember a little, he said finally. I remember you used to sing to me. Something about a river. Nathaniel's face broke open with an emotion so raw it was almost painful to witness. The wide Missouri, he said softly. I used to sing that to you every night when you were a baby. I can't believe you remember that. I don't remember the words, Toby admitted. Just the feeling of it. Like it was safe. Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression, a kind of grief and gratitude tangled together so tightly it was hard to separate them. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to keep singing it, he said. I'm sorry for a lot of things, Toby. I know sorry doesn't fix what I broke. I know I don't get to just show up and expect everything to be okay. But I wanted you to know that not one single day went by where I didn't think about you, even during the years I was too much of a coward to reach out. You deserved a father who showed up, and I wasn't that person, and that's on me, not you. Never you. Toby's small chin trembled, and I felt my own eyes filling with tears I hadn't expected, watching my son wrestle with an emotion far too complicated for a 10-year-old to fully hold. Why didn't you come back sooner? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. Before you got sick. Why did you wait until now? Nathaniel didn't offer an excuse, didn't try to soften the truth the way I half expected him to. Because I was ashamed, he said simply. And shame makes people hide instead of fix things. I spent years telling myself I'd reach out when I was better, when I had my life together, when I deserved to see you again. But the truth is, Toby, nobody ever fully deserves the people they love. Sometimes you just have to show up anyway, imperfect and scared, and hope they let you try. I waited too long to understand that, and I'm sorry it took something like this to finally give me the courage. Toby was quiet for a long moment, and then, in a gesture that undid me completely, he stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around his father's neck. Nathaniel froze for a heartbeat, as though he couldn't quite believe it was happening, before wrapping his arms carefully around his son, his shoulders shaking with quiet, overwhelmed tears. I stood there watching them, tears sliding freely down my own face now, feeling something in my chest that I could only describe as the sound of a very old wound finally beginning, just barely, to close. Word of what was happening had begun to spread quietly among the wedding guests, and I noticed my sister making her way toward us across the lawn, her wedding dress gathered in one hand, Gareth close behind her, both of their faces etched with concern. Roz reached me first, her eyes wide with questions she didn't yet know how to ask. "Claire, what's going on? Is that—" She stopped, recognition dawning on her face as she looked past me toward Nathaniel, still kneeling with Toby in his arms. "It's a long story," I said quietly, wiping my eyes. "I'll explain everything later. But it's okay, Roz. I promise it's okay." She studied my face for a long moment, searching for the truth beneath my words, and whatever she found there seemed to reassure her enough to nod slowly, though her eyes remained soft with worry. "This is your day," I added, squeezing her hand. "I'm sorry this happened right now, of all days." Roz shook her head firmly. "Don't you dare apologize for this. Family is family, Claire, messy as it is. If Toby needed this moment, then this is exactly where it was supposed to happen." She glanced toward Nathaniel and Toby again, her expression softening. "Besides, I always did like that man's voice when he used to sing at our old backyard barbecues, even when I couldn't stand what he was doing to you. People can be more than one thing, I suppose. Broken and still capable of love." We stood together for a few more minutes, giving Toby and Nathaniel space, until eventually Toby pulled back slightly, wiping his own eyes with the sleeve of his suit jacket. "Are you going to come to my baseball games?" he asked Nathaniel, his voice hesitant but hopeful, the question of a child testing whether hope was safe to hold on to. Nathaniel's face was a mixture of joy and sorrow so complete it was almost unbearable to witness. "I would love nothing more in this world," he said carefully, "but buddy, I have to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty. I don't know how much time the doctors have given me. I don't want to make you a promise I might not be able to keep. But I want you to know that whatever time I have left, however much or however little, I want to spend as much of it as your mom will allow getting to know you. Even if it's just phone calls, or letters, or a few visits. I don't need forever, Toby. I just don't want to waste whatever time is left." I felt something settle in my chest at those words, an honesty I hadn't expected from a man I had once known as someone incapable of confronting hard truths. Looking at Toby's face, I saw a flicker of something steadier than mere hope, a kind of cautious trust beginning to take root, fragile but real. "Mom," Toby said, turning to me, "can he come to my games? Just sometimes? I don't need him there all the time. Just sometimes would be okay." I looked at Nathaniel over Toby's head, searching his face for the truth of his intentions, weighing 6 years of absence against the raw vulnerability standing before me now. I thought about all the therapy sessions I had sat through trying to help Toby process his father's absence, all the birthdays where Toby had quietly scanned the room for a man who never showed up, all the nights I had held my son while he cried without fully understanding why. I thought about forgiveness, and how it wasn't a single decision made in a garden on a sunny afternoon, but a long, unfolding process that would likely take years to fully understand. And yet, I thought about the alternative, closing this door permanently, denying my son the chance to know his father before time ran out, denying Nathaniel the chance to make even a small measure of amends before his own story ended. "We can try," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "Slowly. With boundaries. But we can try." Toby's face lit up with a relief so profound it nearly broke my heart all over again, and Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly, murmuring a quiet, broken thank you that seemed to carry the weight of every regret he had carried for 6 long years. The rest of the wedding continued around us, guests slowly returning to the celebration, the string quartet resuming its gentle music, waiters moving smoothly between tables with trays of champagne. Nathaniel stayed only a short while longer, careful not to overstay the fragile welcome he had been given, exchanging quiet words with Toby, promising to call in a few days once things had settled, before slipping quietly out through the garden gate the same way he had arrived. Before he left, he turned back once more and looked at me, his eyes full of an exhaustion that went far deeper than physical illness. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me have this. I know I don't deserve it." "This isn't about what you deserve," I said, echoing words I had spent years learning to believe myself. "It's about what Toby needs. And maybe, in some small way, what I need too, to stop carrying this anger everywhere I go." I paused, surprising myself with the honesty of what came next. "I hope your remaining time, however long it is filled with more peace than the years before it." "I mean that, Nathaniel." He nodded, tears slipping silently down his face, before turning and walking away down the gravel driveway, his figure growing smaller against the bright afternoon sky until he disappeared around the bend of trees lining the property. I turned back to find Toby watching me, his small face thoughtful in a way that made him look older than his 10 years. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked quietly, echoing the same question he had asked me 100 times over the years whenever he sensed my sadness beneath the surface of ordinary days. "I think I am," I said honestly, kneeling down to look him in the eyes. "It's a strange kind of okay, Toby. Sad and hopeful all mixed together. But yes, I think I'm okay. Are you?" He considered the question seriously, the way he considered most things. "I think so too," he said finally. "I was so scared when I saw him. I thought he was going to hurt you again, like before. But it wasn't like before at all." He paused, chewing his lip thoughtfully. "I'm glad I got to hug him. Even if I'm still kind of mad at him too. Is that okay? To be both things at once?" "That's more than okay," I said, pulling him into a hug. "That might be one of the wisest things I've ever heard anyone say, and you're only 10 years old." He laughed softly against my shoulder, a small, genuine laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. We rejoined the wedding celebration soon after, and though the afternoon carried an undercurrent of emotional exhaustion neither of us fully shook off, there was also a strange, quiet lightness settling over both of us, the particular relief that comes after finally facing something you've spent years avoiding. Roz found me later during the reception, pulling me aside near the dessert table while Gareth twirled his new mother-in-law around the small dance floor set up on the lawn. "You know," Roz said, watching Toby laugh with his cousins nearby, seemingly lighter than he had been in years, "I always wondered if you'd ever get any kind of closure with Nathaniel. I worried you'd carry that anger forever, quietly, the way you carry most things." She squeezed my hand gently. "I'm proud of you, Claire. What you did today, letting Toby have that moment, forgiving Nathaniel enough to allow it even though you didn't have to, that took more strength than most people could manage." "I'm not sure it was strength," I admitted. "It felt more like exhaustion, honestly. Like I was too tired to keep carrying the anger any further." I watched Toby across the lawn, laughing freely now, and felt something settle deeper into place inside my chest. But maybe that's what forgiveness actually is, sometimes. Not some grand, noble decision, but simply putting down something heavy because your arms can't hold it anymore. Roz smiled, resting her head briefly against my shoulder. "Well, however it happened, I'm glad it did. And I'm glad it happened today, of all days, surrounded by people who love you both." In the weeks that followed, life slowly found a new rhythm. Nathaniel called every few days, brief conversations at first, careful and tentative, gradually growing more comfortable as Toby's initial hesitation softened into cautious warmth. He came to one of Toby's baseball games a month later, sitting quietly in the bleachers beside me, visibly weaker than he had been at the wedding, the illness clearly progressing despite his efforts to hide its toll. Toby hit a double that day, and I watched Nathaniel's face light up with a pride so pure it nearly made me forget, just for a moment, everything that had come before. Over the following months, Nathaniel's health declined more rapidly than any of us had hoped, but in that shrinking window of time, something remarkable took root between him and Toby, a fragile, imperfect relationship built not on grand gestures but on small, honest moments. Phone calls about school projects, a handwritten letter Nathaniel sent explaining, in simple terms a child could understand, what alcoholism had done to his brain and why it had taken him so long to get help. A single afternoon spent teaching Toby 3 chords on an old guitar, the same guitar he used to play, the Wide Missouri, on all those years ago. I watched my son navigate complicated emotions with a grace that humbled me, learning in real time how to hold both anger and love, grief and gratitude, without needing them to resolve into something simpler than they actually were. Nathaniel passed away on a quiet morning in early spring, nearly 8 months after that afternoon in my sister's garden, with Toby having had the chance to say goodbye to him just 2 days before, sitting beside his hospital bed, holding his father's thin hand, telling him about a science project he'd been working on while Nathaniel listened with the exhausted, radiant attention of a man memorizing every detail he could before running out of time. At the small memorial we held for him, Toby stood and read a short letter he had written, his voice steady despite his tears, thanking his father for coming back, even if it had taken far too long, even if their time together had been achingly brief. He said something that day I will never forget, something that has stayed with me through every difficult season since. I used to think forgiving my dad would mean forgetting what he did wrong. But I learned you can remember everything and still choose to love someone. That's not forgetting. That's just being brave enough to let love win anyway. I share this story with you today not because it is simple, or because it offers an easy answer to the complicated question of forgiveness, but because I believe, deeply, in the power of second chances, however imperfect and however late they arrive. I believe that anger, while understandable and often justified, can become a weight we no longer need to carry once we're ready to set it down. I believe that children are capable of a wisdom about love and forgiveness that adults often spend a lifetime trying to relearn. And I believe that even when time runs short, even when mistakes cannot be undone, there is still room for healing, still room for grace, still room for a father and son to find their way back to each other, even briefly, even imperfectly, before the story ends. If this story touched your heart even a little, I want to ask you to take a moment and leave a comment below about a time in your own life when forgiveness felt impossible, and yet you found the strength to offer it anyway, or a time when someone offered that grace to you. I read every single comment, and I believe these stories we share with each other, these small windows into our most difficult and most healing moments, are exactly what our community needs more of in this world. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey like this one. These days, Toby is 12 years old, taller now, still thoughtful, still an old soul in the way he moves through the world. He keeps his father's old guitar in the corner of his room, and some evenings I hear him picking out the 3 chords Nathaniel taught him, humming a melody that sounds, unmistakably, like a river. My sister Roz and Gareth are expecting their first child this coming winter, and I find myself thinking often about the strange, winding nature of family, how it breaks and mends and breaks again, how love manages, somehow, against all odds, to keep finding its way back to the people who need it most. I think about that afternoon in the garden often, the way my son's trembling hand had grabbed mine, trying to protect me from a pain he didn't yet understand, and how that same small hand later reached out, brave and open, to embrace the father who had once caused that pain. I think about how forgiveness rarely arrives the way we expect it to, rarely wrapped neatly in resolution, but instead comes quietly, imperfectly, often in the middle of someone else's happiest day, asking only that we have the courage to let it in. And every single time I think about it, I am grateful, more grateful than words can fully hold, that when my son whispered those frightened words to me that afternoon, some part of me knew enough to walk toward the fear instead of away from it, because on the other side of that fear was a goodbye neither of us knew we needed, and a love that, against every broken promise of the past, finally found its way home.